Close your eyes for a moment and think back. Do you remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison? A televised funeral, crowds weeping, headlines declaring the end of an icon. You're not alone. Millions of people share that exact memory. But here's the problem. It never happened. So if the world remembers something that never existed, what does that say about the reality we live in? The Mandela Effect that gave the effect. Its name, Nelson Mandela. You grew up believing certain truths. Fixed points in your mind, like the color of the sky, the words of your favorite cartoon, or the life and death of world leaders. But what if I told you? Some of those truths were never real. One of the most unsettling examples, the one that gave this entire phenomenon its name, began with a simple, chilling question. Nelson Mandela died in prison, right? Millions of people across the world, from the United States to Europe to South America, all carried this exact memory. They remembered watching his funeral on TV. They remembered grieving newscasters, mourning citizens, even world leaders giving tributes. The images felt vivid, the feelings raw. But in this reality, Nelson Mandela did not die in prison in the 1980s. He was released in 1990, became the president of South Africa in 1994, and passed away in 2013. So how could millions of people share a memory of a man's death that never happened? This is the Mandela Effect. And tonight, we'll pull back the curtain on the glitch in our collective memory that started it all. Glitch in memory. Ask anyone who swears by this phenomenon, and they'll tell you the same thing. They remember it. Not vaguely, not as a passing thought, but as a crystal clear moment in time. For many, the memory goes back to the mid to late 1980s. Nelson Mandela, imprisoned since the 1960s for his role in opposing apartheid, was, according to these recollections, never released. Instead, he died in prison. Some people recall hearing the news on the radio. Others swear they saw it on television. A funeral broadcast. Mourning citizens waving South African flags. A somber ceremony with tearful tributes delivered by foreign dignitaries. And it wasn't just an isolated detail. Entire storylines built around it. Some recall that Mandela's widow, Winnie Mandela, gave a moving speech. Others even remember specific phrases, headlines declaring him a fallen hero, or anchors talking about the tragic loss of a revolutionary. These were not hazy fragments. They were elaborate, living memories. And they weren't confined to one country. People in the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, South America, and beyond all described the same experience. Mandela's death in prison, years before his actual passing. The eeriest part? Many of those who claimed to remember it were just children at the time. And yet, the memory stuck with them as they grew older. For some, it resurfaced when Mandela was released from prison in 1990, sparking deep confusion. For others, the shock came much later, in 2013, when news of Mandela's actual death spread. Across forums and conversations, people described that moment of disbelief. Wait, didn't he die decades ago? I remember it. I saw it. How is this possible? It felt less like confusion and more like evidence of a fracture in reality. The harsh reality. Here's the documented truth. Nelson Mandela did not die in prison. He was arrested in 1962 and spent 27 years behind bars, most of them at the notorious Robben Island prison. In 1990, amid growing international pressure and shifting politics within South Africa, Mandela was released. His freedom was broadcast across the globe, showing a smiling older Mandela raising his fist triumphantly as crowds cheered. 4 years later, in 1994, Mandela made history by becoming South Africa's first black president after the fall of apartheid. He served one term, stepping down in 1999, but remained a towering figure of peace, reconciliation, and justice worldwide. Mandela lived to the age of 95, passing away on December 5th, 2013. His funeral that year was indeed a global event. Leaders like Barack Obama and countless others attended. It was watched by millions around the world. And yet, none of this erases the fact that millions remember a completely different timeline. There is no record, no hidden news clip, no forgotten article documenting Mandela's supposed prison death. Yet the memory persists, carried collectively by thousands, if not millions. The harsh reality is clear. Documented history and personal memory stand in direct opposition. And when enough people share the same false memory, the unsettling question remains: was it truly false? Origin and discovery. So how did this phenomenon come to light? The term Mandela Effect was first coined in 2009 by Fiona Broome, a paranormal researcher and author. While attending a conference, she found herself in a casual conversation about Nelson Mandela's death. She mentioned her own memory of Mandela dying in prison during the 1980s. To her surprise, the people around her agreed. They had the same memory, down to the televised funeral and international mourning. Stunned by the consistency, Broome began digging. She launched a website inviting others to share their experiences of misremembered history. To her astonishment, hundreds of people poured in with identical accounts. Mandela's death behind bars, decades before 2013. From there, it snowballed. Broome cataloged countless other examples of shared false memories, like the Berenstain Bears versus the Berenstein Bears, or movie quotes like, "Luke, I am your father." But Mandela's supposed death remained the most famous because it was the one that sparked the term itself. The phenomenon gained traction in online forums, particularly places like Reddit and niche paranormal communities. People began trading stories, posting side-by-side comparisons of what they remembered versus what the record showed. By the mid-2000s teens, the Mandela Effect had gone viral. YouTube creators, bloggers, and social media users spread the discussion, each adding their own eerie testimonies. And the effect wasn't brushed off as simple misremembering. It felt too big, too coordinated. It was as if the entire world had slipped on a crack in the pavement of reality, and only now was anyone noticing. Fiona Broome herself described it as a glitch in the matrix. She didn't claim to have the answers, but she gave the phenomenon its name and a community to grow. What began as a conversation about one man's life and death had turned into a global movement of questioning reality itself. Psychological theories. Of course, not everyone believes we've fallen into parallel universes. Psychologists have long studied the fragile nature of memory, and the Mandela Effect became a prime case study. One explanation is confabulation, when the brain fills in gaps of memory with details that feel true but aren't. Unlike lying, confabulation isn't intentional. It's an unconscious process where the brain constructs a narrative from fragments. Another theory involves schema-driven memory. Our minds don't store every detail of an event like a video recorder. Instead, they store the gist, the overall story, and later reconstruct the details. In Mandela's case, the gist may have been his long imprisonment and the international outrage it sparked. For many, it may have felt inevitable that he would die in prison, and over time, the expectation blurred into memory. There's also the role of misinformation. News reports in the 1980s frequently discussed Mandela's declining health in prison, along with fears he wouldn't survive. Combine that with constant media images of global funerals for other figures, and you create fertile ground for false memory. Case studies show this isn't unique. Psychologists Elizabeth Loftus and others have demonstrated how easily memories can be implanted or altered. In controlled experiments, people have been convinced they were lost in a mall as children, or that they met Bugs Bunny at Disneyland, a physical impossibility. Once the seed of memory is planted, the mind protects it. It feels real. And when other people confirm it, the illusion strengthens. From a psychological perspective, the Mandela Effect isn't evidence of reality bending. It's evidence of just how fragile and malleable our reality already is. But even with these theories, the question lingers. Why do so many unrelated people around the globe share the same mistake? Why not hundreds of different ones? And that's where the fringe theories step in. Fringe theories. If psychology can't fully explain it, perhaps physics or something stranger can. One of the most popular fringe theories is the idea of parallel universes. In this interpretation, the people who remember Mandela dying in prison may have lived in a different timeline, one where he did. At some point, that timeline merged or shifted, and now they exist in a reality where Mandela lived until 2013. Supporters often point to quantum mechanics, where particles exist in multiple states until observed. Could consciousness itself be shifting across dimensions, carrying fragments of one universe into another? Another eerie theory ties the Mandela Effect to CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research. In 2012, the Large Hadron Collider famously discovered the Higgs boson particle, sometimes nicknamed the God particle. Some believe this experiment disrupted the fabric of reality, causing ripples or shifts between parallel timelines. The timing, after all, aligns closely with when the Mandela Effect began spreading widely online. Others look to the concept of a simulated reality. If we are living in a simulation, then the Mandela Effect could be the result of coding errors, memory rewrites, or system updates. Just like a video game might patch an error, the simulation might adjust events, leaving behind lingering fragments in human memory. More spiritual interpretations tie the phenomenon to collective consciousness. Perhaps memories aren't stored just in individual brains, but in a shared, unseen network, like Carl Jung's collective unconscious. If that network glitches, entire populations might experience the same false recall. Fringe theories may sound fantastical, but they resonate deeply with those who've experienced the Mandela Effect. Because when your memories feel so vivid, so true, the idea of just misremembering doesn't feel satisfying. Maybe the Mandela Effect isn't proof of memory failure. Maybe it's proof that reality is far more fragile, layered, and mysterious than we dare admit. Cultural echoes. The Mandela Effect didn't just stay in obscure forums. It exploded into mainstream culture. By the late 2010s, it became a full-blown internet phenomenon. Memes flooded social media, split images of what you remember versus what actually exists. YouTube creators built entire channels around cataloging Mandela effects, while TikTok videos went viral with shocked reactions to shattered childhood memories. Celebrities, too, chimed in. Comedians joked about it on stage. Talk show hosts asked their audiences about famous misquotes. Musicians referenced it in lyrics. The phrase Mandela Effect entered everyday conversation as shorthand for any uncanny false memory. And Mandela himself, his image, his story, became permanently tied to the phenomenon. His real life and death were overshadowed by the strange parallel death that millions believed they witnessed. The effect also tapped into something primal, the fear of unstable reality. People debated endlessly online, asking each other, "Do you remember it this way too?" Strangers across continents bonded over their shared disorientation. What started as one misremembered death became a cultural mirror, reflecting how easily truth can fracture, and how quickly people will question the world around them. So here we are. In this timeline, Nelson Mandela lived until 2013. But in countless minds, he died decades earlier in a prison cell, mourned by millions. If your memory can betray you so completely, what else isn't real? What other cracks in reality are waiting, unnoticed, in the corners of your mind? The Mandela Effect forces us to confront an unsettling truth. Either our memories are far weaker than we believe, or our reality is far stranger than we can possibly imagine. But I want to hear from you. Do you remember Mandela's death in prison? Or did you always know he lived until 2013? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'll be reading through them all. And if this dive into fractured memory unsettled you, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more reality-bending stories, and share it with someone whose memory you don't quite trust. Because behind every memory, there's a truth waiting to escape.